Just about every lumber town in this province had one, a beehive burner. Back in 1970, the government started phasing out the oddly shaped sawdust incinerators because of the pollution they caused. Now the beehive burner has all but disappeared, but not before Lou Englehart could preserve them on canvas. Mac Rhyme will report.
Because I want the people of British Columbia to come in someday into a museum or into an enclosure where these beehives will be on exhibition and be able to see their past heritage.
Full of stories, full of purpose, Lou Englehart at 70. For most of his life he taught art in BC schools, but all his life he's been an artist. Paints landscapes, seascapes, portraits, and for 11 years, Englehart painted beehive burners. He figured it was up to him to preserve that part of BC culture. The guys at the mill had some trouble with that. They figured he was a spy.
They thought at first that I was a stool pigeon from the government. You know, they'd say, "Oh, you're from the government." And I'd say, "No, I'm not. I'm an artist, you know."
Of course, that was only part of the problem. Even when they knew Englehart was an artist, they couldn't understand why, of all things, he wanted to paint a beehive burner.
And they would say, "You want to paint that ugly-looking thing, you know?" And I'd say, "Yes. I want to sketch it and do a watercolor of it, and later on I'll render it into oils, you see." "What do you want to do that for? It's such an ugly thing, you know." And I'd say, "Well, just give me permission, and then I'll show you." And usually they did. And so when I came back an hour and a half or so later with my watercolor, they'd say, "Do you want to sell that?"
And he didn't sell them. He ended up with 210 paintings of different burners. 6 of them he's made into reproductions. But Lou Englehart is holding on to his collection until the right buyer comes along.
Somebody's going to pick it up.
Expo is a possibility, I understand, at least for a display.
Yes, Expo is a possibility. But so far, we haven't been able to get the right answer from Expo as to whether they wanted to exhibit the beehives or not. Maybe they think it's an ugly thing, too.
That's our report for tonight. More news later with the National at 10 and Night Final at 11. For Mike and everybody at CHBC, I'm Tom Walters. Have a good evening.
Hello, I'm Joyce Resin.
I'm Bill Dobson.
And I'm Judy Piercy. This week, we feature a man who is preserving British Columbia's history on canvas.
You know, it wasn't very long ago that beehive burners dotted the landscape of British Columbia. They were huge iron cones that sloped up to a screen on top. Sawdust, chips, and scraps from the sawmills that built British Columbia were fed into them and burned. My story this week is about a man who is preserving them on canvas, Lou Englehart.
Now, this is a good example of the beehives that are being destroyed, you know. If not by man, by nature. And there's one that's being destroyed by nature because it's not being used, and the elements have taken over.
Rust.
Rust here. It'll soon be gone.
Lou Englehart has been painting all his life. He started doing Christmas decorations way back in elementary school. He studied art in the United States and Canada with just a break for the Second World War, then began teaching art in the BC secondary school system. So now, in retirement, why paint beehive burners?
I taught for 25 years for the school boards, and when I retired, it was a forced retirement, heart condition. Then I started to paint practically day and night, you know. Of course, I started in BC. In 1970, they put out a law, the government did, that all beehive burners in the mill sites be destroyed because of pollution. And I figured that was so much our heritage that was going down the tube without a record, you know. So I went around sketching and painting in watercolor first. And 11 years later, I ended up with 210 oils
Of these beehive burners.
of the beehive burners.
They came down.
Lou's wife, Della, accompanied him as he traveled the length and breadth of British Columbia, painting and sketching in every nook and cranny. Mrs. Englehart didn't resent his passion for burners. She helped him with her own sketches of detail, and she treated each trip as a holiday. She looks back on the 210 paintings with pleasure.
Well, they're a record of all the places that we've been, the places that we felt were important to record for history, and they're very much alive to us.
The burners are not the only beehive in Lou Englehart's artistic bonnet. He's traveled right across Canada, sketching what he considers to be historic sites that might disappear before people get a chance to appreciate them.
This is Newfoundland, and it's at Bonavista and Walter Mullen's Store and Stage.
Who's this guy here?
This fellow was washing cod. He had cleaned it the night before, and now he's in the process of washing it with a towel. I've been going to Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. That's what I'm working on now, Newfoundland. Sketching and painting fish houses, and they're called stores in Newfoundland because they're being destroyed. Commercial fishing has taken over, and the fisherman is getting too old to repair his stage, his store, so big seas come up and take them.
Lou was forced to retire from teaching because of a heart condition, but he never stops painting. I don't suppose you've seen much of his work for sale.
Frankly, I've never been interested in selling, you know. I'm a fellow that paints. I have exhibited in the States, but not too much, you know. Maybe a half a dozen exhibitions, one-man shows. But most of the time, Bill, I just paint and stack them away. First, I want to finish Newfoundland, and I hope I do that before too long, maybe another 6 years in Newfoundland, I may be finished. And then I may go to the back countries of Quebec and paint areas like St. Paul's and the Habitant villages, and that's what I'd like to do.
From beehive burners to Newfoundland docks to the back countries of Quebec, Lou Englehart preserves history on canvas.
That's great. Bill, does he have any thoughts at all about going to the prairies, perhaps, and painting some of those huge grain elevators on the horizon?
No, he really wants to get to Quebec, but the grain elevators are coming down, and they're building new ones, but they don't seem to have the character that the old ones have.
Right.
And
It
so
would be
he
nice
could
if